Recording 59.
You will hear a phone conversation between an estate agent and a woman wishing to rent accommodation. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 10.
Fairfield Rentals, Andrew Williams. How can I help you?
Oh, hello. I'm calling from the UK. My family are moving to Canada early next year, and we're hoping to find somewhere to rent in Fairfield for the first 6 months while we settle in.
Right, I see. Well, let's get your details.
Yes, my name's Jane Ryder.
Okay, Jane. And can I have a phone number? The best number to get you on.
Well, that'd probably be our home number. So, 0044 for the UK, and then it's 208 613 2978.
All right. And an email address, please, so we can send you out all the information and forms.
I think it's best if I give you my husband's email. He's sitting in front of a computer all day, so he can print stuff off and get it back to you sooner than I could. It's richard@visiontech.co.uk. I'll just spell the company name for you. That's VISIONTECH.
Great. And we have a question here about occupation.
Richard's an IT specialist for an advertising company. They're transferring him to their Fairfield branch.
Actually, just your job for now, thanks.
Me? I'm a doctor at the hospital in our town.
Okay, I'll put that down. Now, what kind of accommodation are you looking for? House? Apartment?
An apartment, probably, as long as it has 2 bedrooms. There'll be me, my husband, and our 10-year-old son.
And so with an apartment, you're less likely to get a garden.
That's okay.
But what about a garage? Is that something you'll want the apartment to have?
Yes, that's definitely important.
Okay, just a moment. I'll just make a note of that.
But, before we go on, I should probably say now that what we don't need is any furniture, because we'll be shipping all that over, and I don't really want to pay for storage while we're waiting to buy a house.
Not a problem. I'll make a note of that.
Actually, though, just thinking about the kitchen, what can I expect from a rental property? I mean, what kind of equipment is provided?
Well, the normal thing is that you get a stove. I think that's a cooker in British English.
OK, good to know. But how about a fridge? We'll be selling ours before we come, so if possible, we'd like the apartment to have one for when we arrive.
I can certainly add that to the form. If there's any other whiteware that you need, like a dishwasher, for example, there are plenty of stores here that'll arrange delivery on the same day as purchase.
Thanks. Hopefully we won't need to buy too many things.
Now, how about location? Have you done any research into the Fairfield area?
Not that much so far.
Well, you mentioned you have a boy. I imagine you'd like to be fairly close to a school.
Good idea. That would help. What's public transport like in Fairfield? Is it easy to get around?
The bus service is pretty comprehensive. There are plenty of local routes, services into the city and out of town.
OK, and for a two-bedroom apartment, what sort of rent should we expect to pay?
Well, looking at the properties we have at the moment, prices start from around $730 per month and, depending on the area, can go up to $1,200.
That's too much. Something halfway would be better.
So, would your limit be, say, $950?
I'd say so, yes.
Can I ask if you smoke or if you have any pets?
No to both questions. But I do have one more request, please.
Yes?
Well, I've also been offered a job at Victoria General Hospital, and I suspect I'll be working nights occasionally. So what I really need from any apartment is for it to be quiet, so I can catch up on sleep if necessary during the day.
Congratulations on the job offer. I'll add your request to the form. Well, what I'll do is compile a list of suitable properties for you and send them via email. Can I just ask, how did you hear about us? Obviously not from our commercials if you're living in the UK.
Actually, it was a friend of ours. He spent a few months in Fairfield a couple of years ago, and he pointed us in the direction of your website.
Well, it's good to be recommended. So, what I'll do is...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2.
Recording 60.
You will hear a police officer giving advice on protection against local crime. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Constable James MacDonald, and as you may know, I'm the community police officer for the local area. That means that, as part of my job, I try to get out in the community as much as possible, talk to the people that live in this neighbourhood, people like yourselves, and make sure there's an effective level of communication between the public and the police, hence the reason for this meeting. There have been several burglaries in the area in the last few weeks, and I'd like to talk about ways you can keep your home and property safe. So I'd suggest that a good way to start is by talking to your neighbours and exchanging contact details with them. This will allow you to get in touch immediately if there's anything suspicious happening next door. Then make sure you have a good discussion about the best course of action to take in case of emergency. Make sure everyone is clear about what to do and who to call. If you plan ahead, this will prevent uncertainty and even panic should anything happen later. Another thing that I would advise you to do is always leave your radio playing, even when you go out. And if you keep your curtains closed, burglars are less likely to try and break in because they can't be sure whether someone's home or not. Now, none of us want to be in the situation where we can't get into our own home, but do take time to think where the best and safest place is to leave your spare keys. Putting them under the doormat or anywhere near the front door is just asking for trouble. You'd be surprised how many people actually do this, and it makes life really easy for burglars. All these things will help keep your community safe and will cost you nothing. However, if you are going to spend some money, what I'd recommend more than anything else is that you invest in some well-made window locks for your house. This will give you peace of mind.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
OK, moving on. Unfortunately, there's been an increase in the number of minor crimes and antisocial behaviour in the general area, and I want to talk about some specific prevention measures that are being proposed. First of all, the skate park. As you probably know, it's well used by younger people in our community, but unfortunately we're getting more and more reports of broken glass, making it especially dangerous for younger children. One possible solution here is to get rid of some of the trees and bushes around the park, making it more visible to passers-by and vehicles. If the vandals know they're being watched, this might act as a deterrent. As you will have heard, a couple of local primary schools have also been vandalised recently, despite the presence of security guards. The schools don't have the funds for video surveillance, so we need people in the neighbourhood to call their nearest police station and report any suspicious activity immediately. Please don't hesitate to do this. I expect most of you are familiar with the problems facing Abbotsford Street. It seems that no amount of warning signs or speed cameras will slow speeding drivers down. I'm happy to say, however, that the council have agreed to begin work over the next few months to put in a new roundabout. What else? Oh yes, the newsagent and the gift shop on Victoria Street were both broken into last week, and although no money was taken, the properties have suffered some serious damage. Access was gained to these shops through the small alleyway at the back of the properties. It's dark, and as you can imagine, no one saw the thief or thieves in action. So we've been advising shop owners along there about what kind of video recording equipment they can have put in. We'll then be able to get evidence of any criminal activity on film. The supermarket car park is also on our list of problem areas. We've talked to the supermarket managers and council authorities, and we've advised them to get graffiti cleaned off immediately and get the smashed lights replaced. If you don't deal with this sort of thing at once, there's a strong possibility that the activity will increase and spread, and then it becomes...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3.
Recording 65.
You will hear a first-year marketing student called Leo talking to a second-year student called Anna about his marketing report. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Anna, I wanted to ask you about my marketing report. I'm not sure about it.
That's okay, Leo. So what do you have to do?
Choose a product or service, then compare two organisations that produce it. I'm doing instant coffee.
But haven't you got a weekend job in a clothing store? Why didn't you choose clothing?
That was my first thought, because I thought it'd give me some practical examples. But when I searched for men's clothing on the internet, there were hardly any articles. So then I looked for coffee, and I found there were tons.
Yeah, there are so many brands on the market now. OK, so how much have you actually written?
I've done part 1 on economic and technological factors. I found some good data on technological changes, how in Australia fewer people are buying instant coffee because of cheap coffee percolators that they can use to make real coffee at home.
But there's also a movement away from drinking coffee.
Switching to things like herbal teas instead because they think it's healthier. But that's not really to do with technology. It's more cultural. Anyway, for part 2, I'm comparing two instant coffee companies, Coffee Now and Schaffers, and I've made this table of products.
Right. Let's see. So you've got the brand names and prices and selling size and descriptions. OK, the table looks good. You'll get marks for research there. Where will it go?
In the section on the marketing mix, under product.
Not in the appendix?
No.
OK, but it's too factual on its own. You need to add some comment in that section about the implications of the figures.
Right, I'll do that. Now, I want to say that I think that Schaffers is more of a follower than a leader in the coffee industry. Now, I'm putting that in the section on market share. Does that seem okay?
Let's see. So you've begun by explaining what market share is. That's important. But you've got to be careful how you give that opinion.
Do you think it should go in another section?
Well, it's fine where it is, but you've got to back it up with some data, or they'll say your report lacks weight.
OK. One thing I'm worried about is finding anything original to say.
Well, since this is your first marketing report, you're not expected to go out and do interviews and things to collect your own data. You're just using published data. So the analysis you do might not throw up anything that people didn't know before. But the focus is more on how you handle the data. I mean, you might take something like a graph of sales directly from a website, but what makes your work original is the perspective you provide by your interpretation of it.
Oh. You know, it's all so different from business studies assignments at school. It's really surprised me.
What? How much research you have to do?
I expected that. It's more, I knew exactly what I had to do to get a good grade at school. And I knew I'd be expected to go more deeply into things here. But I haven't got information on how the lecturer is going to grade my work, what he's looking for.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, one thing you have to remember is that in a marketing report, you've got to have what they call an executive summary at the beginning. I forgot that and I got marked down.
Yeah, I've drafted it. I've got an overview.
Have you got something about the background there?
Yeah.
Good.
So, I've just made a summary of the main points. I wasn't sure whether or not I should have my aims there.
No, that's too personal. The executive summary is just like what a manager would read to get a general idea of your report if he was in a hurry.
Right. Then I'm okay for the first main part, all of the macro environment stuff. But it's when I get onto the problem section, I've listed all the problems that Coffee Now and Schaffers are facing. But then what?
Well, you have to prioritise. So indicate the main problems, and then you analyse each one by connecting it with a theory. That's where your reading comes in.
Okay.
Have you done your implementation section yet?
I've thought about it. So that's where I write about what could be done about the problems.
Yes. And it's got to be practical, so don't forget to specify things like who would be involved, and the cost, and the order that things would be done in.
Right. Well, that shouldn't take long.
You'd be surprised. Actually, that's the bit that tends to get badly done because people run out of time. That and the conclusion.
Oh, any hints for that?
Well, it's got to draw out the main points from your report. So it's got to be quite general. You need to avoid introducing new stuff here. It's got to sum up what you've said earlier.
Okay. Thanks, Anna. That's been a big help.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4.
Recording 66.
You will hear part of a lecture about the history of fireworks in Europe. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
An interesting aspect of fireworks is that their history tells us a lot about the changing roles of scientists and technicians in Europe. Fireworks were introduced from China in the 13th century. Up to the 16th century, they were generally used for military purposes, with rockets and fire tubes being thrown at the enemy. But they were also sometimes a feature of plays and festivals, where their chief purpose was related to religion. By the 17th century, the rulers of Europe had started using fireworks as a way of marking royal occasions. Technicians were employed to stage spectacular shows which displayed aspects of nature, with representations of the sun, snow and rain. These shows were designed for the enjoyment of the nobility and to impress ordinary people. But fireworks also aroused the interest of scientists, who started to think of new uses for them. After seeing one firework display where a model of a dragon was propelled along a rope by rockets, scientists thought that in a similar way humans might be able to achieve flight, a dream of many scientists at the time. Other scientists, such as the chemist Robert Boyle, noticed how in displays one firework might actually light another, and it occurred to him that fireworks might provide an effective way of demonstrating how stars were formed. Scientists at the time often depended on the royal courts for patronage, but there was considerable variation in the relationships between the courts and scientists in different countries. This was reflected in attitudes towards fireworks and the purposes for which they were used. In London, in the middle of the 17th century, there was general distrust of fireworks among scientists. However, later in the century, scientists and technicians started to look at the practical purposes for which fireworks might be employed, such as using rockets to help sailors establish their position at sea. It was a different story in Russia, where the St. Petersburg Academy of Science played a key role in creating fireworks displays for the court. Here, those in power regarded fireworks as being an important element in the education of the masses, and the displays often included a scientific message. Members of the Academy hoped that this might encourage the royal family to keep the Academy open at a time when many in the government were considering closing it. In Paris, the situation was different again. The Paris Academy of Sciences played no role in staging fireworks displays. Instead, the task fell to members of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. As in Russia, the work of the technicians who created the fireworks was given little attention. Instead, the fireworks and the spectacle they created were all designed to encourage the public to believe in the supreme authority of the king. However, science was also enormously popular among the French nobility, and fashionable society flocked to demonstrations such as Nicolas Lemery's display representing an erupting volcano. The purpose of scientists was basically to offer entertainment to fashionable society, and academicians delighted in amazing audiences with demonstrations of the universal laws of nature. In the course of the 18th century, the circulation of skills and technical exchange led to further developments. Fireworks specialists from Italy began to travel around Europe, staging displays for many of the European courts. The architect and stage designer Giovanni Servandoni composed grand displays in Paris, featuring colourfully painted temples and triumphal arches. A fireworks display staged by Servandoni would be structured in the same way as an opera, and was even divided into separate acts. Italian fireworks specialists were also invited to perform in London, St. Petersburg, and Moscow. As these specialists circulated around Europe, they sought to exploit the appeal of fireworks for a wider audience, including the growing middle classes. As in the previous century, fireworks provided resources for demonstrating scientific laws and theories, as well as new discoveries. and displays now showed a fascinated public the curious phenomenon of electricity. By the mid-18th century, fireworks were being sold for private consumption. So the history of fireworks shows us the diverse relationships which existed between scientists, technicians, and the rest of society.